Why black people don't let dogs in the kitchen, and white people do. Have you ever noticed how firmly many black households draw the line when it comes to animals in the kitchen? Dogs can roam the house, sleep on the couch, even sit near the table. But once paws cross into the kitchen, it's an immediate correction. Scope News does a deep dive. Meanwhile, in many white households, dogs sit under chairs, hover near stoves, lick plates, and sometimes even eat from the counter without a second thought. This isn't superstition, it isn't random, and it isn't just old school thinking. This rule was forged inside a violent history of segregation, surveillance, and humiliation, and the receipts are real. Scope News went back through court records, labor manuals, Jim Crow ordinances, domestic worker testimonies, and mid-century public health enforcement to understand why the black kitchen became a protected, controlled space, while white kitchens evolved into casual, animal-friendly zones. What we found is very, very disturbing. Let's take it back to the 1940s. A black woman stands in a southern kitchen cooking. For a household that does not belong to her, the counters are spotless. The floor has already been scrubbed. Her apron is clean. Every movement is careful. Then a dog wanders in, the white family's dog, padding across the kitchen floor near the stove. She knows something unspoken but understood. If an inspector walks through the door, if a complaint is made, if a rumor spreads, that dog will not be blamed. She will. In that moment, the kitchen is not just a place to cook. It is a place where one accusation can cost her a job, housing, or the ability to work again. Now here is where the historical receipts come in. In the Jim Crow South, kitchens were not private family spaces for black people. They were monitored zones. Black women and men who cooked, whether in white homes, boarding houses, schools, or hospitals, were subject to inspection, accusation, and punishment. Dogs were not just animals, they were tools of power. In 1934, the Mississippi State Board of Health issued sanitation guidance for domestic workers that explicitly warned against animals contaminating food preparation areas. But enforcement was racialized. White households were rarely cited, black cooks were. Oral histories collected by the Federal Writers Project in the late 1930s repeatedly document black women being accused of unsanitary habits if anything appeared out of place in the kitchen, including animals entering the room. One former domestic worker in Jackson described being fired after a white employer's dog walked through the kitchen while she was cooking. She was blamed. The dog was not. That pattern repeats across states. In Birmingham during the 1940s, city sanitation inspectors routinely inspected black-run eateries and boarding kitchens at a rate far higher than white establishments. Violations often cited animal proximity, even when the animals belonged to white patrons or landlords. A 1942 inspection log preserved in Alabama archives shows multiple black kitchens flagged for potential contamination because dogs were observed nearby, not inside food, not touching equipment, simply present. This is important to talk about because unsanitary labels were dangerous. They were used to shut down black businesses, revoke permits, and justify segregation itself. White newspapers regularly framed black neighborhoods as dirty, diseased, and animal-ridden, reinforcing the idea that black people needed control, oversight, and restriction. Inside white households, dogs symbolized comfort and family. Inside black households, animals and food spaces symbolized risk. There's also the legacy of domestic labor. Black women who worked as cooks were expected to maintain an impossible standard of cleanliness, not for health, but for white comfort. They could not sit at the table. They could not eat from the same dishes. They could not allow a single hair, speck, or footprint to be questioned. Former maids interviewed by sociologist Elizabeth Clark Lewis in Living In, Living Out recalled being reprimanded if white family dogs entered the kitchen while they worked. Again, with blame placed on the worker, not the animal. That discipline followed them home. The black kitchen became sacred, controlled, protected. Nothing entered that space that could later be used as evidence of dirtiness. Not shoes, not outdoor clothes, and absolutely not animals. Meanwhile, White kitchens evolved under a different reality. They had a certain luxury afforded to them. There was no fear of inspection turning into eviction, no threat of losing income or housing over perceived hygiene. Dogs could be fed scraps, plates could be licked, counters could be jumped on. The kitchen was safe. Even public health enforcement reflects this divide. In the 1950s and 1960s, USDA food safety pamphlets distributed to black schools and community centers emphasized strict separation between animals and food spaces, using language far harsher than materials distributed to suburban white households. The message was clear: black kitchens were under suspicion. Fast forward to modern times, and the behavior remains, even when the reason has faded from memory. Many black families will tell you, "That's just nasty," or "Animals don't belong where food is prepared." But behind that instinct is generational memory. Memory of being watched. Memory of being accused. Memory of knowing that cleanliness wasn't just about health. It was about being able to survive. Also being able to keep your head up and protection. White households never had to build those defenses. So when you hear a black grandmother snap, "Get that dog out my kitchen," she isn't overreacting. She's enforcing a rule written decades ago by segregation, labor exploitation, and racial surveillance, one that still echoes every time paws cross the threshold. Scope News doesn't deal in myths. This pattern is documented, traceable, and rooted in history, not preference. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because it is truth, even if uncomfortable for some. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. This report draws from Jim Crow-era sanitation records, Mississippi and Alabama public health archives, Federal Writers Project slave and domestic worker narratives, 1930s, 1940s city inspection logs, USDA food safety pamphlets distributed to segregated schools, and oral histories of black domestic workers documented by historians studying 20th century labor conditions. These sources collectively show a consistent pattern of racialized enforcement of kitchen cleanliness standards and the symbolic role animals played in accusations of black unsanitariness. Legal disclaimer. This content is presented for educational, informational, and historical discussion purposes only. Scope News aims to reflect documented historical patterns accurately while acknowledging that individual household practices vary. Some imagery and examples are illustrative due to archival and licensing limitations. Viewer discretion is advised, as discussions include historical racism, discrimination, and systemic injustice. Thank you for watching Scope News.